met each other before, and I think we dominated the panel, didn't we, Joe, with our conversations. And what was really good about the conversation, which I found really entertaining, was about the appreciation that Joe had of records management. So I wanted to share that with everyone today, from a RIMPA perspective or from a records management perspective. So first of all, Joe, thanks so much for taking the time out. I know you're a very busy lady. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So if you could just give us a bit of background on who you are, where you're working, and how you got involved, and we'll take it from there.
Great, thanks, Anne. Who I am? Wow, hard questions straight up. Who I am, basically, I am obsessed with data governance, data strategy, data everything. I have been in the data world for a while now, a bit over a decade. I have been working in government in various Australian government in various agencies and departments since, I want to say 2011. And first job was in ministerials, but I kind of went into different areas, a lot of it surrounding data and information. Basically, I had to make decisions with the data and information I had at hand. Now, that can be problematic when, one, you can't trust it, two, you can't find it, and you basically have to guess. And when you guess, when you make decisions, that can impact people's lives. And where I was working at the time, if I made the wrong call, there was a big impact. So that kind of is like, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to be able to quantify how an organisation treats users, their data and information, which kind of got me into data governance. Which definitely got me into data governance. It wasn't actually really titled data governance at that point. It was still kind of emerging. Obviously, records management has, well, it's one of the oldest professions because there's records dating back many, many years. But this was an emerging field. You know, the whole data scene was blowing up and everyone was doing their own thing. And so I was like, well, we need to do a standardized way of this. And I remember I was an APS 4 at the time, and I go, one day I want to lead enterprise-wide approach to how we manage data. And then over 10 years, that evolved into many different things. I did different data roles, both technical, business, policy side. But I found my love for data governance, really helping people do the right things by data. And I found kindred spirits in the records world, and I didn't actually know they were kindred spirits until my boss at the time said, we should bring records over into your remit. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so we did, and I realized that, sorry, I go off on tangents, I should have like started with that, but really I just love data governance because it's an enabler, and similar to records people, it's an enabler. It's not just about preserving information, it's about making it useful, that information management piece. So that, long story short, have done data strategies, have evaluated data strategies, established data governance functions, things like that. That's basically where I've been in the past several years.
Jay? What's your role at the moment?
Yeah, good. So I actually, in February, took up a role in the Australian Communications and Media Authority, looking after data governance. So I don't have information governance and records in my remit at this in this role. I just started in Feb. Before that, I was in IP Australia doing data and information governance and data capability and strategy. I lead a small team, like most information governance and data governance teams are small. I lead that, and right now I'm just trying to get a handle on all of our data assets and how we're using them and protecting them.
You mentioned at the when you first introduced yourself about the importance of accurate and effective information, so being able to be able to find what you're looking for. Obviously, you experienced that when you first started in the APS. Is that what I mean? I know you mentioned about that's where you found your love, but is that what else drew you into data governance besides the importance? Because we all know that as records managers, Joe, we know that that's important. We've been trying to tell all of you guys for a long time. Not so much you, but I'm talking about management. You know what? So what else? What's other messages? What drew you to specialise in data governance?
Well, I think it's the unappreciated, important link between people, processes, and systems. I think when I couldn't make decisions because I didn't have all the data, it's like, why don't I have the data? Why can't I trust it? And then I'm like, people are doing the wrong thing. Wait, no, the processes aren't appropriate. Wait, people aren't doing the tools. And then I kept trying to attack's the wrong word, address at the different points. And then I realized it's actually the connection between the three that is important, misunderstood, and ignored possibly. So I just found that so fascinating because in some areas you had amazing tools, but it actually wasn't applied to the right processes, or people weren't trained up in it, or you had really passionate people and they didn't actually have the tools and they were getting frustrated and doing workarounds, which was creating poor behaviors. And I guess same with data governance and records and stuff. If you kind of make the rule, if you make it easier for people to do the wrong thing, they're going to do the wrong thing. And so I think my data governance and information governance and records have that have to make doing the right thing the easiest option. And I think we haven't kind of got that sorted yet, because we haven't joined together the people, processes, and technology.
Yeah, and you talked about when you first started that data, that this trendy, and I'm going to say this because from a records management perspective, data governance and data management is sort of overcome. It's the new IT, I'm going to call it. So many, many years ago, IT was the flavour and now data is the flavour. You said it was emerging. I mean, data's always been around. Why is it now all of a sudden so predominant? And then this is off our question list here, Joe. Sorry to do this to you.
No, please.
Yeah. Why do you think that it's all of a sudden now so predominant in comparison to when you started in 2011, for example, where you said it was emerging?
Because we realized we can make money off it. We can have efficiencies. Back in the day, when you look at records information, the main goal was to preserve it for evidence, things like that, but not so much utilize it. We figured out a while ago you can use data, and that's why we say data is an asset. And so people started using it in all different types of ways, some not so great, some great, but they're all having a go at it. So I think we only realized that data was an asset and we can use it to either for improve insights, but also to reduce unnecessary operational overhead to carry out our businesses. I think that's what changed. We figured out we can actually use data in many different ways.
Do you also think it could be because all of a sudden we're living now in a digital world, let's be honest, and it's accessible? Yeah. So I'm gonna say to you that information to us is an asset and always has been an asset, right? So you think about it, government departments have always relied on great information to make accurate decisions using the right information, probably the right data, and we didn't even call it that at the time, to progress and to be accountable, and transparent within the constituents that they serve or they answer to. But it's always been an asset, but never really recognised as one, where data's sort of jumped the gun. They're already in they're in the forerun. It's an asset. Why do you see that? Is it because of this digital approach?
Oh, possibly. I think though, and I don't want to be too controversial here, I think
please do.
Potentially there's been more focus. So how we've I guess grouped records and information is about how it's been produced, not how it can be used.
Yep.
And I think that's something that possibly records information gov could learn from data governance is how we can actually use it, and equally what data governance can learn from records information is how to bloody store it and look after it. So I think it's yes, you've seen it as an asset to protect, but I don't think you've seen it as an asset to utilize necessarily. Because look, I don't know. The thing is, records, as you'd know, isn't just something that sits in a trim or an objective. Records is everywhere in all the systems, and with the digital age, back in the day, so you had your content manager thing like that, a specific system where you store all your records. But the reality is, people are going to be people, and they will basically work where it suits them. So we had everywhere probably has a situation where there was the record system where you kept special things sometimes, and hopefully you've got some sort of naming convention where you can search for it and find it. But then you also have network drives where people store stuff, use stuff, and may just put it there, or they put it on their desktop. And then all of a sudden COVID happened, and different online productivity tools came around, and people like, oh, this is a bit faster. This, I can save all my content in here. I can create multiple versions of it. No one's going to ask me to fill in all these different metadata fields, and I'm just going to fill it up with garbage. So basically, how we've been operating is all this different information is in all these different systems. Probably the only thing that's really been treated as a record is what's in, your content manager type of systems, but in the rest, it's a bit of a wild, wild west. So I think it's really hard, because on one side, there are records everywhere, but people it's not a record unless it's in a system, which isn't actually true. It can be a record outside of that records management system. So yeah, it's I think it's completely disrupted it, and I think both sides of the fence haven't really caught up. Same with data governance. So we're the unloved child of the data world, because we're not as fancy, we're not as exciting as a Viz or data science. I actually look at the information governance and records people and data governance people as we're the vegetables. And we've kind of been selling it a bit as overcooked brown vegetables. And so I think it's really important to actually put some spice and herbs in it and make them exciting, and make it real for people. So people are like, oh yeah, I do need to eat the vegetables, and these vegetables are actually delicious. So yeah, we're the vegetables of the data and information world. Sorry, guys.
So no, don't say sorry, because my bit of my catchphrase is I've been trying to make records management sexy. And anyone that knows me, my husband says I'm going to die very unsatisfied. So take that however you like. So your analogy might be a little bit more open to others to say that we're the brown vegetables, where I say I'm trying to make it sexy. But you are right. You're spot on. And you said something earlier when you said about sometimes putting it into an EDRMS. I'm going to call them generic, so a records management system. And you're right, because there's so many other options. But it's not, you mentioned network drives, and you mentioned, the desktop, and then you mentioned like a records management system, but then there's also all these other software systems that every single system has records, right?
Yeah.
And data, okay, as a result of that. And I'm going to say we collectively, as in the records management industry, are really only starting in the last few years to go, okay, let's manage these records in place, as in where they are, not start telling everyone, get them out of there and put them into the EDRMS or the records management system, because that doesn't work, as we've found out over the last 30 years. That just doesn't work. Is there a similar sort of issue happening in the data governance or the data management world, where there's stuff everywhere and not necessarily, we're not getting the true accurate data that we want?
So there was. And I think the thing that data has done is lean into technology and the advances a fair bit. I'm not saying we're doing it perfectly, but we are looking at centralized data platforms, for example, or data platforms. So basically, making sure data is available, data is trusted, and you can actually use it. I think potentially records haven't done that as much. I think, but to be fair, I mean, records have been told, you're all paper-based, you belong in the basement. And yeah, sorry, I'm going to go on tangent. I won't. I'll come back to it. So it does happen. So data was everywhere. People didn't know which data to use, especially for analytics and insights. Don't even get me started on data quality. That's one of the biggest problems we have in the data world. But we have leaned into technological advances, and standing up data scientists and all of these things to help make data useful. And I think so. Yeah, there is data everywhere, but we're getting better at putting it into appropriate places and, really telling the difference between, okay, what is a system of record? So where is the source of truth in this, and what is a system of reference? So basically what's taking a copy of the data, putting it into not a system of record, and actually using that data for insights or whatever it is. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're talking about data and records a lot, and I'm interested to hear your opinion, and I sort of know your opinion, but how do you define the relationship, or what should be the relationship between records and data governance?
So I like analogies, but basically I see them as siblings that were separated, who have found their way back to each other. Realistically, both sides have very similar values, and objectives. And recently data kind of became the favorite
Trendy.
child. Not gonna
Yep.
lie,
Yep.
favorite.
Yep. Yep.
Still mistreated, but favorite. And then I think um, with the push of generative AI, it's brought them back together again,
Yep.
because generative AI basically uses unstructured data, all the information to generate this content. And so I don't know, the data governance, the data child is like, oh yeah, we've been down this, but we feel a bit out of our depth, in some of it, because we haven't looked at, kind of looking at generative AI. If you're going to start feeding large language models and things like that, you need to know what content you're actually putting in there. And because the content has kind of been everywhere, not necessarily managed with right metadata applied, I think we're both a bit like we're in a oh damn moment. What are we going to do? Because AI is coming so fast, but we need to be able, and I think, being able to work together, similar back to those, what are we trying to do, making data and information available, protected, usable, all those things. So it's we the relationship is we basically want the same things, and we are both staring down the barrel of the same risks.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and so we just need to work, like working together, um, is our only option.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a comment in the chat from John Hinchy.
Oh yeah.
Y'all read data as bricks, information as the building. Does that sound? Do you agree with that?
Data is the bricks and information as the building.
Yeah. There's a couple of thumbs up to that comment too, so it must be a fairly
I'd like
common.
to sit on that one for a second.
Okay,
I
that's
think
fine.
because it's funny, from my perspective, information is just data in a different format.
And records managers that say information's records.
Yeah, no, I know. And
I think
it's funny.
information's the overarching umbrella, in my opinion. I think that data and content and knowledge and records and I don't know, whatever else we can find all sits under that umbrella. That's my opinion anyway. I think it's a generic word.
Agree. And I probably would have had the exact same thought prior to the whole generative AI thing coming out. Because
Yep.
what do you feed generative AI? Data. What are you feeding it? Unstructured data, information, and it's creating new information. So it's I don't think it's as black and white. I do love that analogy, but I think it's we're going down a road where we're still defining it, like where it's forever changing. So yeah, I'd like to think more on the data as bricks, information as the building. But regardless, without proper governance and foundations, you're going to have neither.
Of course. Someone else said data is the ingredient, information is the cake. So everyone's got an
and
analogy.
Biz is the sprinkles on top.
But you're right. I suppose the data gives it, if you're going to look at the data, using that analogy from a cooking perspective, data could be like the flour, which gives it structure, as you mentioned. But you also mentioned about generative AI, about AI, which is the huge thing for us at the moment. I'm getting feedback. You mentioned about that it takes data and it takes unstructured information and to us being records managers probably can create a record, right?
Yeah.
By combining together. It can. Now this is the controversy. We weren't going to talk about AI at all, but do you have some opinion on that? Sorry, Joe, putting you on the spot again, but do you agree, like take the data, the unstructured information or the unstructured records, whatever, combine them in AI, then can form another record out of that, or a record?
My opinion won't give you a very good answer. I think we're behind in this. I think how we define records hasn't necessarily changed.
Fair
over
point.
a very long time, but the world
Yep.
has. So look, I'm definitely not a records expert. That's why I've hired records experts in the past who have been phenomenal, by the way. But I think it's weird that it hasn't progressed, but the rest of the world has. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that question. And I also
That's
yeah,
all.
it's
I didn't mean to put you on
yeah.
the spot. Sorry, I was just
Oh, no, no,
interested
I
in your
think it's
opinion.
really
Yeah, sorry.
fascinating, but yeah, I think it's not necessarily a technical question. I think it's more of a how we defining a record question.
Yeah, good point. Actually, good point. You mentioned about that you've hired some good records people and you've had a lot of experience. And this is what you and I got talking about some months ago, was about the importance about records and data working together. So, in your experience, what are the benefits of records management and data governance being one? And I'm happy for you to share some stories in your previous engagement where you did bring them together.
Yeah, one word, allies. Um, so the look, when records came into my space, I wasn't a records person. I didn't get it. Like I got it conceptually. I was very much an average bear in my understanding of it, but I think the people I had in my team were looking at in-place records management. I think, bringing them together, it helped kind of push the narrative. So as an example, in data governance, I care about data breaches. Everyone knows what a data breach is. And I think with our everyone working in different productivity tools, won't go into different tools. They're just creating content left, right, and center and not necessarily classifying what it is, especially if there's personal information, for example. And if people are using all of these, just creating all of this content, there are risks of data breaches happening basically in documents, right? And what was really helpful for me is, well, so when we brought the team together and kind of spreading the good word, more and more people became aware of, oh, there's CVs that are just in this group location kind of thing. And me as a data governor, well, I call myself a data governor, by the way, but as a data
I love
governance
that.
person, I was like, okay, I definitely know how to deal with data breaches in the structured data world, but oh my goodness, people are just putting stuff randomly in all of these different systems and metadata isn't applied. And so I was actually able to lean on my records and information governance expert to help work with the business in how to identify where this content was living and be able to work with the people that were like the system administrators to kind of shut things down and control that, who can see what. So being able to minimize risk in the unstructured data world, I couldn't have done it without my records information governance people. So yeah, it's I think that was the question. I went on a
Yeah, it
tangent
was.
again,
No, it
but
was, Jared.
yeah,
But
it's
I want
yeah.
you to elaborate. How did that
Yeah.
work? So you brought them together because that's an unusual thing, data. Let's say they both sat under yourself. Is that correct as the manager?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that work? Because I think this is what a lot of the people listening would want be interested to know. How did the amalgamation or the merge of, or the, oh, sorry, the bring together of the two
Yeah.
siblings, how did that
Yeah.
go?
I think, well, I actually, I do want to talk about why it kind of made sense first, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I'm assuming a lot of people here are APS and they've dealt with the checkup survey, or at least aware of the checkup survey
Good chance.
under the archives. Well, basically, for whatever reason, the chief data officer in my old organization had to lead that. Even though they didn't look after records, they had to lead the answering it. And I then inherited it, and I did the coordination across the whole agency. And most of the questions were being answered by the records team who were in property. And
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that they were in the property security area because, I mean, when you look at records when they used to be physical, that kind of makes sense.
Geez, I
Kind of.
reckon you're drawing at straws there a little bit,
Oh,
but yeah,
yeah,
go
well,
on. Yeah, go on.
possibly. But we in my data governance team, we actually had a fair bit of familiarity of records in general. And so when it kind of came to, it's like, oh, well, we'll bring them over here because my, we wanted to, I don't know, make data useful, whatever format it's in, whether it's structured, unstructured. So it just kind of made sense. And bringing them into the team, we're like, well, we're already aware of the things that you're up against in checkup, and now we don't have to go out far to get these things answered. We could actually have it in-house and actually develop things together. Look at what problems am I having, what problems are information governance records people happening at that time. There was a migration of records in a standalone system into a more digital system. And data migration, it's pretty much the same regardless structured, unstructured. So it was a big migration exercise in bringing it from one repository to another. So it was kind of I was able to support them in that process, but they were also able to support me in my different, data governance-y, data breachy risk issues. So it's really about finding those common goals, objectives, finding those things that just annoy you. It's like, why can't people just put things in the right way? Why can't I find information? So it's really about highlighting those, friends are formed from a common enemy, and our common enemy was bad practice around data and information. And that's how I brought it together. And then it was how I like to have the team. So I had distinct teams. So the information governance records and data governance, I would actually, the people in the data governance that would be their primary skill set, and they would start moonlighting as a bit of a records information gov person, then vice versa. And so I'd get them, if one was working on the data governance framework, for example, sending it over to the information governance people and go, does this actually work for you? Does this make sense? And so getting them to major in their skill set, but also minor in the opposite one. Because then they can find opportunities of how one side can help the other, vice versa.
And did it work? Can I ask genuinely, like, did the two groups quite appreciate each other's skill set, want to learn from each other?
They're all friends still to this day. And
I think it's a good sibling group is where you're coming from. They're not fighting.
It is like the siblings that get along. Who would have thought? But no, it's I think when you look at records people and data governance people, we don't do it for funsies. We do it because we're genuinely passionate about and care about it. And I think it's about finding that common passion is what brought it all together, and showing how it's same but different.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned about the common passion, which is fine, and then we've talked about the integration, but what about the records management principles? How did you see, like, for our members, the enhancement that records management principles gave your data governance group? So you've worked with both now. They both sat underneath, well, as you controlled them both. So how did you see that work?
So data people are hoarders, basically. Right. We hoard data. We don't want to let go of data because it might be useful at some point in the future.
Justin, we call that just in case. Justin.
Yeah, just in case. And look, and so I think, so we just collect all the data because more data is great, right? And I think for me, records, it's really about keeping what is useful and having a mechanism to define what is useful and how long it is useful for. And look, I know that doesn't always happen, and there can be hoarders in the records well too. But I think that was probably the biggest thing that data governance could learn from the records space is data governance, we care about data asset, but we don't necessarily think about, okay, how long is this asset going to be an asset for? And we hoard data, to be honest. So I think the principles of records management can help us remove us hoarding data, and then equally on the other side, I think data governance can help with records and information to how to utilize that data, that information. Sorry.
You said that people hoard, and that's not just in the data areas. Can I tell you, from a records management perspective, most departmental heads like to hoard information for the just in case, we'll keep everything and storage is cheap and why bother and that sort of thing. Did your data governance people actually listen? Because we as Records have been putting out this that retention and disposal. Look at the risk. Don't keep it if you don't need to. What's the value? Da da da. Was that an easy sell? I suppose is where I'm coming from, Jo, to your data governance people.
Oh yeah, they weren't necessarily the concern. It was the people that the data governance people were trying to enlighten, I guess. We still haven't gotten there though. I think there is kind of gaps in what to retain for data. Like, so as an example, Power BI reports, which change all the time. They get a refreshed update with data. No one can tell me when I can destroy them. So if anyone can tell me, I'd really love a chat, by the way. But I think it's because we don't quite yet understand the power of data and how and when we can use it. Maybe that's a struggle. Like it's the people, the just in case, that is an ongoing battle. And I didn't realize it was too bad in the records world, but I think for me, in the data world, in data governance, people, when they hoard information, then it feeds into an analytics report or product or whatever it is. If you've got two people trying to do some analysis and they use different data sources, they're going to get different answers. And that leads to wrong decisions, and that's everywhere. So it's an uphill battle with that one. That goes into the data quality.
The example you gave, Jo, about the Power BI reporting, and so records are unable to give you a clear direction on the retention. I'm not having to go your records people. I'm just asking if you're saying you'd happy to have that conversation.
Oh no,
is there
I mean
a reason
more
why?
in general.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was if it's like, I mean, they've been my records people in my current agency, they're awesome. I think there's something overarching though from the legislation around it, about. That's kind of where I was getting at. Obviously, if a Power BI is being used to go towards a decision added to a paper or whatever to a committee or board, you file that away. But I think when we're living in a world where data is updated every single day
or every minute,
that's it. Like it's really hard, and it's not logical to save Power BIs as a PDF every 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, like and so that was just something that if anyone can let me know, I'd be appreciative.
That's an example of where there's a difficulty, and I think that's a really valid example about that. It's just continually updating. And I know at the moment, Jo, you're in an area, you've come from where you were previously where data and records were together, and at the moment they obviously work together, but they are separate, so they're not under the one manager, from my understanding from you. Are you finding this difficult? Is this a different environment for you? Would you prefer them to be together?
Look, I want to build an army, but it's I think the records team in my organization that I'm in, they're wonderful people that really give a damn, and they're so open to helping, and bringing you in for like if you're an example, so the lead of the other team of the records team here, she was in a conversation with the risk area trying to develop a risk matrix, and something came up around data. It's like, oh, have you spoken to Jo? And then vice versa, if I'm in a conversation where records has come up, which it was yesterday, I'm like, oh, have you spoken to the records person? So even like, I mean, I would love to have just one giant family of data information governance. I'd freaking love it. But even though we're separate, we're basically just siblings that live in a different office, in a different house. But I think even if it'd be great if everyone could come together, but in lieu of that, coming together spiritually and intellectually can be just as beneficial, and kind of being that united front.
You've given us a really, what I think a great scenario where the two are working together and there's the synergy, and you very much appreciate that synergy, Jo, which is why you and I got on with each other and spoke a lot about it. But I'd be interested in the chat, if while we continue on, if they could talk about what their how they're within their organisations, if it's quite separate. I mean, I've worked in the industry for a long time, and I haven't for the last 6 years, but previous to that, to be quite honest, very separate: data and records, or records and information, whatever title, that's what's sexy at the time, but very separate. And you've just given us an example of where it's worked really well to come together, and I couldn't agree more. Sorry, and I don't mean to go on, but Rimper have a relationship with, or a partnership with, Dharma, and that relationship has come on the basis that Dharma very much promote the importance of records management with data. So which has been which is great that's coming from that industry body. I suppose where I'm going with all this comment is, where do you think we are in that overall? I think you're a forerunner, Joe. Where do you think other organisations are with this data record synergy? You talk to lots of other people, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think it's so varied, and I must admit also data and data governance is so varied across agencies. Like everyone's just trying to do their best with the resources they have. And the thing is, because records and data governance people are always under-resourced and usually an afterthought, it's really hard for people to kind of progress. And I think, what I have found that helps getting, I guess, some progression, continuous improvement, is to kind of look, if you're not quite sure, to look to those different bodies. Like Rimper, you're a great example of kind of showing this is what the world's doing, opening up the art of the possible, what is possible in this space. And Dharma can help with that from a data perspective. Sorry, I've lost track of the question. What was the question? It was
no, that was just no. You were on the right track. It was about what other organisations. I said you were a forerunner in this, about your thought pattern about bringing the two together and but having them work together. It makes sense, right? Where do you see other organisations are with that? Because as I said to you, me personally, I don't see them as advanced as what you are.
I think it really comes down to the individuals that see it. And look, I must admit, it wasn't my idea to bring them together in my old job, but I definitely supported it. My previous boss wanted to do it. One, because she was passionate about information governance and records, and I'm equally passionate about data governance. And so it really, unfortunately, is still coming down to just weird, passionate people that can see the connection. I think, having like seminars like this and different talks about those connections can help with it. But I think it's we all have to look beyond our little thing and see how it connects with the rest of the world. But I think we're all kind of getting catapulted into doing something about this with the whole generative AI, which I won't talk about too much, obviously. But it's I have seen a couple of places that are starting to bring them together. I have seen places bringing them together and splitting them apart again.
That's government, though, isn't it? Whoever's at the top has basically got to work their territory out, and they split and bring back, and not just records. They do it across the board. I think that that department now and that department now, and
I think it's also there are different. As I said, it comes down to the people. Some people are like, I like how records have been for the past 100 years. I don't want, like, records belong in one system only. And so in those teams, when they have brought in, and it's like, data is everywhere, information's everywhere, let's do in-place records management, they're like, yeah, no, thank you. So I think it's about having both sides ready for it. It's varied so much. As I said, I think it's organizations like, Rimper and stuff that can help people kind of get to some sort of same level of understanding.
Do you think too, and this is my opinion, and I know there's someone on the chat, Nancy, has said, that's great. However, we in the records management world, we don't promote ourselves, and we wonder why we don't have a seat at the table, right? So you're saying that let's go back to the sibling analogy that we've been using throughout this discussion, and you're the favourite, you being data governance, or data is the favourite sibling at the moment. Let's call that pretty trendy. You know, we're the dorky sibling, I suppose, and they're the trendy sibling. What strategies, Joe, can we do? I mean, and I know you've probably seen it just naturally happen from your point of view. You might not have gone out of your way to make it sexy. What can we do? What can we do as records managers to get in that same realm as data?
I think, I mean, first of all, people still hate data governance. Every conversation is usually an uphill battle because people don't understand what it is. They think it's just this area that says no. But it's so I think, look, some days in data governance, it feels like death by 1,000 cuts. You try to push the good word, you try to connect with people and get them to do the right thing, and they just tell you to go away. And I think with data governance, the story was first the fear story. If you don't do this, there will be data breaches. I haven't heard too many fear stories from records because if people delete records they shouldn't have, what is the consequence?
We've had things like we love a good crisis or a good disaster, Joe, which sounds terrible, but because it actually gives us a little bit of status, it gives us some status at the time. So, fires, floods, when records are gone and you can't make decisions, or you don't have the minutes of the council meeting or the board meeting or the executive management meeting or whatever, and you can't use that information to make future decisions, it does become an issue. But it's only then that they realise that it's an issue. It's
after the fact, right?
After the fact. It's when everything's really happened. It's bad, everything's gone. It's all been fire, and now, I'm going to use it. Shit, we've got nothing, basically. What do we do? How can we make decisions? But what I'm saying, we need to get it. The message needs to be important before that.
And I agree. So that's so similarities with data governance. That's how data governance was sold, and the problem was that everything got shut down, couldn't be used. I think, and so what I have changed over the past years, the messaging. So yes, data governance, data breaches, things like that, to get people's ears pricked up. So above managers, like the managers in general, heads of organizations, they don't like being on the newspaper, like that really bad catastrophic thing, but they also don't like to waste money. So that's kind of where I hooked in. Data governance is an enabler, and it's really about, if you do this, you will have these opportunities. I think we have sold both sides of the coin. So data governance and also records information have sold what we're trying to do based on fear of something bad happening. But I think we need to also look at something bad happening could be missed opportunity. Yeah. So for example, in the records information governance world, the amount of time I spend trying to find something, and I'm not talking about this organization in general, I'm talking over years, trying to find some information, use tools to make my life easier. So I think it's about, I think what records information governance can do is lean into tooling that's available, like tools that are available, technology, and show how you can actually have benefits by it'll be quicker for people to do their jobs, so people can find the information. So if people can find the information, they can do analysis on I don't know, how their processes, what they're doing. It's back to that. How do you show data and information as an asset, not just to be protected, but to make lives better and value out of it?
And you mentioned IT, and I couldn't agree more. And the tools and the technology. I think, and I'm going to say this is going to be detrimental, but I think records managers missed the IT boat some years ago too, when software or systems became a big part of what we do. So paper started to phase out, and it's now totally phased out. But I'm talking in the 80s and even early 90s. I think that we as records managers didn't jump on that wave very well, and we let technology just continue on without worrying about the importance of managing the records within these systems.
Yeah.
So we're not, I suppose my point of it is I don't think we've been very good at it. We need to get better. And you mentioned a word that's so special to me because this is what I feel that I have. And I think this is what's important. And you've mentioned it a couple of times throughout this discussion is passion. You've said
Yeah.
you had people above you that had passion. So I think that's important. It's about the people that have a care factor, let's be honest.
And yeah, and to be honest, the passion was probably four voices. And so there were all these people above and below that didn't have the passion and selling it. It's basically what's
Yeah.
in it for them. When you go above, it's about when you're trying to sell it above, it's about, minimizing the risk of missed opportunity, but also minimizing the risk of us being, in the news. When you look at the lower levels, it's about how do you make your lives easier? You need to find information to do your job, and a lot of people just can't. In my old organization in IP Australia, a lot of people had to use the records management system to find previous applications that were submitted forever ago. And if they couldn't find that information, the job would take longer. So I think
Absolutely.
it's about how do you make the operational lives easier, and how do you make I guess, the more strategic upper management's life less troubles.
Yeah, and we're certainly trying. I just think that data, from your perspective, data governance have probably done it better. Maybe because they've been doing it as collectively. As I said, it's trendy. It's been trendy for the last 10 years and getting even more trendy as we go along. We've now got, government have now got specific data teams where that didn't happen, 10 or 15 years ago. Or maybe, you started in 2011, so I'm probably being a little bit conservative. So even before that, you would have been fairly new in that data space in 2011, I would have thought.
Yeah, oh, I was very new, and I remember, we were looking at different, automated entity resolution, and I was an APS 4, so a nobody really, and I'm like, okay, if we do this automated and it's wrong, what are the impacts of it? So I think it's about being bold and showing your passion, regardless of who's going to rustle feathers. I think it's use your passion, be unapologetic about it, and just go, this is the reality of it. And show the good, the bad, but I think most importantly, show people the way, but also adapt to the people you're trying to show. I can't just go in and say you need to do data governance because I said so or the government says so. I think it's like every time I'd go talk to people about if they're trying to get them to be a data steward for the data asset, I would tell them different stories. Like I understood what their process was, like their business, why were they there, and apply it in their context so they understood. And I think, this is something that I know records managers try to do when you look at what and when we can dispose things. They try and work with different business areas, understand their functions, and I think using that knowledge to actually sell it is important. I think sometimes there's a missed opportunity of doing that, but if you're doing an assessment of people's business practices, which I know a lot of people in this space probably would, actually look for what annoys them and show them how good information governance and records, or data governance, if I get some converts, can fix their problem, because realistically, every problem we have can be fixed with governance.
Yes. But you made the comment before that, and I think records management didn't use this word. We didn't use governance years ago. We do now. But we still had that, you're just going to tell me no. I mean, I'm a big believer that records managers years and years ago used to, if it wasn't in the guidelines and if it didn't fit in the metadata and it wasn't in the classification scheme and it wasn't in the legislation, we just put our hand up and said no. And I mean, you think about it, what do people do when you say no to them many times? They go and look for an alternative, or they'll just do it anyway, right?
Yeah,
Which is really bad, but in the sense of it's not suiting their business practices by saying no. So you're
yeah.
right, Joe, getting to know the business, which I think that's what the data people have done better, I suppose.
And I think so. I'm a firm believer in business-led data, not IT-led data. So my data, where I am in data, is not actually in the IT area. And in my previous role, data was not in the IT area.
Yep.
I think business-led data and information is key, because although and IT are there to support us with the tools and stuff, but unless you don't have your requirements, they're just going to give you tools that are useless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree. We've got about 9 minutes before we're supposed to finish up, and I want to ask you a last question. But before we do that,
Yeah.
Lisa, did you have a couple of questions in the chat or the Q&A that you wanted to bring up for Joe and I?
Yeah, there's a few.
It's been going off, by the way.
Yeah, there's a lot of different comments in there. We can just take them at the very end if you would like.
Oh no, I was going to end with Joe giving us a bit of sort of final advice. So if there's any questions in between, I'm happy to. So hang on, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to read a couple here. So from John, I don't struggle with the concept of recognizing, I think saying data. I think the struggle comes from having the data treated as data in a data system. When data becomes a record, it's easier to manage as a record. Does that make sense to you at all?
Yeah, I'm just reading it. Sorry, I think
okay.
the struggle comes from have the data treated as data in data system. Oh shit! I lost the question.
Yeah, because people are talking. Do you think that's like that? Yeah. Do you think there's a confusion there about that? I suppose that's actually, let's use that because you and I have just experienced it. Is there a confusion between what's data and what's a record? Do you think that's still out there in the organisation, in the government at the moment?
Curious. Why isn't data considered a record? So let's say data's come into a system. Isn't that immediately a record?
Not necessarily, is it? I suppose it depends on what the data is.
So, for example, if someone's lodged a complaint into an online system for an organisation or a regulator, as soon as I've lodged that complaint, that's a record.
Yes.
So
But when you collect, I suppose, and I'm going to be very simplistic here, you've got systems. So use the complaint system, for example, and then all of a sudden we do a report at the end of the month, and we got X amount of complaints on pink and purple polka dots, and X amount of complaints on ABC, and X amount of whatever. But I don't want to use any specific examples because I'm going to be picking on a particular government department. But do you know what I mean? And we do a report that said that that's increased, and that we got so many, and that to me, that I know it's stats, but it's derived from data, obviously, right? Then does that report, and I suppose this goes back to your Power BI stuff, that report is a record of what was reported to whomever it was reported to at that time. And I'm being very simplistic, but is that the go? Is that what we're saying?
Well, I think so. Definitely. So the report, what I'm assuming is for a decision or whatever, would be a record. But the data of the original complaint, just the data, that would be a record of someone complaining, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I suppose that where the terminology is coming here, Joe, is the difference about we wouldn't call that being records, sorry. We wouldn't call that data. We would call that the complaint. So you've written in, and it depends on how it's collected. So I know what you're saying. I go online and I fill in fields. Yes, is that what you're suggesting? And I'm complaining that way. So to anyone in the data world, that's data because it's actually very clearly filling in fields as such.
Structured data.
Yes, correct.
So I think it because there's structured data, unstructured data, and then there's information that's being collected by whether it's structured or unstructured data and is put into something useful. So information. I guess a record could be any of those things.
And you're right, and it's probably a whole webinar in its own right about defining them and having examples. And I think this is and I'll be honest, I'm going to sort of not end with this, but I'm going to say I think this is the confusion, and it's not that neither you or I or anyone else in the chat's wrong. I think it's actually getting that we being on the same page about data and records, but I don't think it's as easy as that. I think it's actually quite complicated, and it varies from organisation to organisation or database to database or whatever we're talking about. So, I mean, as I said, I used a very simplistic example, but my point is that I think that we need to get that right, as in really be clear about that terminology. What is data? What is a record? What is information? That sort of thing. And I don't think anyone's done that. And I've been working in this role for some time and discussing this very topic globally. And I can tell you now, no one's getting it right.
No, I agree. And when I got my team to, I had to do IP. I did IP Australia's data strategy last year, and I'm like, cool, let's do a data information analytics strategy, and let's also do a data and information governance framework, merge it all together. That was hard. Oh, that
Yeah.
was hard because of those definitions, and I may have kind of thought where you were heading with that. Yeah, it is confusing, and that's the problem. Everyone has their own interpretations of it. And look, records and information governance is not alone in that. For example, the concept of data steward and data custodian in the data world is inconsistent everywhere. And so I think it's like I think. Are we going to get a worldwide standard on what these things mean? I don't know. But I think all we can do, and I think this is a very important point, is to just try and have some sort of improvement to what you were doing. Continuous improvement. It may not be perfect, but as long as it's better than it was, I think that's important. I mean, as I said, records and information governance, like that's been going on for a very long time, and people have put all sorts of stuff into the systems. I think we can't aim for perfect in a forever changing world. We can just aim for better.
And just
There's
on
also a
that,
question here. Sorry,
yeah,
just
go
an
on, go,
extension with
Lisa.
that.
No?
There's a question from Kate. It's just an extension to it. She's asking, does there need to be a division of responsibility between records and data management?
When you say a division, I'm assuming within an organization.
Let's take it that way. Let's interpret
I'm
it
going to
that
take
way.
it that way because if I had my way, I think there needs to be a chief information and data governance officer. I think they should look after all of it. If and when I grow up, I'd love to be one. I think bringing them together is important. I think giving them a seat at the table in the executive level is important, and someone to actually drive the strategic direction of data and information and records together. I think that doesn't necessarily happen. In my old organization, there was a committee that oversaw data and information together, and basically any issues would go to that. Oh no, so I just saw a question pop up. CTO, CDO, and CIO. I'm assuming Chief Technology Officer, Chief Data Officer, and Chief Information Officer. So I
One
think
role or
by
three?
having three,
Yeah.
100%, because CDO, Chief Data Officer, outside of IT is, I think, ideal, because then it can be business led. Yes, I think CTO and CIO can stay in IT.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
But I must say, working together closely with them is key as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's obviously been it's an issue, or not an issue, but it's a discussion point that everyone's been very involved with here. Just one last thing, we've got 1 minute to go, Joe, and thank you so much for your time. But final advice: what can we do? How can we make records management sexy as data? There you go. Put it on you.
Get to know your business. Figure out how you can apply what you're trying to achieve with what their business are trying to achieve. Go talk to your data people, your data scientists. Figure out how you can actually utilize records in an unstructured data format for insights, decision making, and improving things. And what else have I got? Find your data governance people. Get data nerdy with them, truly. Just talk about what they hate about the situation, and you're going to find some commonalities there, and then you figure out how you're going to fix the things that you just hate. Talk to people in your data world. They are your friends.
Thank you, Joe. Again, as usual, you and I could talk forever. It is actually 12 o'clock, and that hour went like that. So
yeah, we'll do 2 hours next time.
We do. I don't know. But thank you so much for your time, Joe. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for attending. And I think this is a topic that we can continue to talk about, which is what the chat's saying about. So have a great afternoon, everyone, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Anne. You've been great as always.
Thanks, Joe. Just stay on if you wouldn't mind. Everyone's going now.
Hang out.
I'm just letting everyone also allow them to write some thank you comments.
Yeah, there is.
I'll print them
There
out and
is.
stick them on my wall.